Our right to free speech is being threatened with this resolution. It sets a dangerous precedent because it attempts to delegitimize a certain people's political speech and to send a message that our government can and will take action against speech it doesn't like.
That's Representative Rashida Tlaib imploring Congress not to crack down on Americans' right to free speech as the House considered a resolution to specifically condemn the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement targeted at Israel's treatment of Palestinians. Unfortunately, her efforts were unsuccessful because she was up against overwhelming odds. The House passed the resolution 39-17. Yes, just 17 members of the House voted against it, 1 Republican and 16 Democrats. Notable progressive Democrats who voted against it were Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Raul Grijalva, Pramila Jayapal, and co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Mark Pocan. Notable progressive Democrats who voted yes: Ayanna Pressley, Katie Porter, and Ro Khanna, which is shocking to me and pretty disappointing. Less shocking to me is that Tulsi Gabbard, who has a history of pro-Israel stances including speeches at far-right Israeli militant fundraisers featuring Sheldon Adelson's wife, as well as hardline stances on Iran, also voted yes. Representative Khanna, who has been a vocal advocate for Palestinian rights, responded to this on Twitter saying he didn't believe the bill would infringe on First Amendment rights and that BDS was impractical for peace. Agree to disagree. The measure, House Resolution 246, opposes efforts to delegitimize the State of Israel and the global boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement BDS targeting Israel according to the bill's text. BDS, a movement which began in 2005, calls for groups to apply economic pressure to Israel and achieve Palestinian independence in the Middle East. The Senate passed a similar bill amid concerns that the legislation violates the First Amendment. And in case you were curious about presidential candidates, in the Senate version of the bill, Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren all voted no. So let's get this straight. The United States government is trying to tell you that a specific kind of boycott, a specific kind of political speech, is condemnable because of the content of that speech, the content being that it's criticizing Israel. That is deeply unconstitutional. The government cannot make value judgments on the arguments made in free speech, and that has been reaffirmed time and time again by the Supreme Court. And to make matters worse, this vote happened just one day after Israel demolished dozens of Palestinian homes in a town between East Jerusalem and the occupied West Bank, which the UN deemed a violation of international law. This is exactly why we need BDS. And that's just the start of the problems with this bill, as written in an excellent press release by one of the 17 no votes, Representative Betty McCollum of Minnesota. She writes, "Israel cannot be delegitimized by any outside movement. It is a nation state that is self-governed and makes its own laws, its own policies. Sadly, and I say sadly because I want peace and security for the Israeli people, it is the actions of the Netanyahu government that delegitimizes Israel's standing in the world community. Actions by Congress, like passing House Resolution 246, which ignore reality and effectively supports military occupation, violations of international humanitarian law, and the subjugation of the Palestinian people, does not strengthen Israel, but it does damage the standing of the U.S. House in the eyes of the world." On point, truly. The scariest part of this bill is that it sets a federal precedent for the already unconstitutional anti-BDS laws that are being passed on the state level, of which there are already over 20. It basically gives the green light for more states to do what states like New York and Texas have done. In Texas's specific case, they passed a law that forced the state to refuse state contracts to anyone who supported BDS, a law that was blocked by a federal judge, but Texas says it's going to appeal. This says to any state, specifically the red states filled with evangelicals who want the Jews to return to Israel to fulfill a biblical end times prophecy in which those Jews would then be slaughtered, go to town. Crack down on your constituents' constitutional rights to protest because the federal legislature isn't going to do a damn thing about it. This is exactly the kind of far-reaching influence of the Israel lobby that Representatives Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib have been warning about, and while they're standing firm on this issue, a great majority of their colleagues have decided to slink in cowardice.